thank you so much to Nick, and I'm glad he named all of, or most of the other people here at the Employment Department who are helping us out. I'm so happy that we have this partnership with the Employment Department where they, not only this room, but it's ongoing. Population Research Center at Portland State University has, we've been around since the 60s, and I'm sure we've had this great relationship with the State Employment Department since then as well. I know I've been around since the 80s, believe it or not, and it's always been a great relationship. So thanks so much for the perfect space, just perfect amount of room for everybody to spread out, and nice facility. So if you have any questions about the conference, I'll be here all day long, or any questions about Population Research Center, just see me whenever you can. And thanks, Nick. Get better. So we're not going to spend too much more time making introductions, because we want to spend at least 90 minutes learning about data.census.gov. And we have Kaneen Reese here from Census Bureau headquarters in suburban DC. So we're really honored to have her come out to the Northwest to teach us about something we're all gonna use, maybe every day in my case. So I'm eager to learn more about it. Data.census.gov.
All right, thank y'all so much. I really appreciate. Sorry, I had to go grab some water. I have a, the persistent cough whenever you're talking too much. So thanks so much. We're very excited. If y'all are aware that we just released our site, data.census.gov. It had been available publicly, but this is kind of some of the bigger first releases that we have. We just released a 2017 economic census, and then also the 2018 ACS 1 year. So just to kind of get a feel of what we're talking about in the room, how many of y'all have used data.census.gov? Okay, good. Have y'all used it extensively, maybe, any of y'all? Okay, but maybe just kind of. Okay, great. So maybe at least have checked it out. Thank you, Charles. That have just checked it out, right? So there's a lot we can talk about, right? Okay, so that's good. Excuse me. Okay, so I just wanted to give you a quick background and why we're doing this. This is definitely one of the questions, especially as people are feeling some pains of having to work with a system that's not 100% finished. That's not necessarily how the census has always worked, but it's where we're going towards, to do things in more of an agile development process, because we don't want to repeat mistakes of the past that we had. We spent a long time building American Fact Finder 2, and then it was released to our biggest release of the decennial 2010, and people did not like it. There were problems with it. People had lots of complaints. I see some shaking heads, so I think that y'all remember some of those things. And we understand that this is not necessarily any better. It's still hard that people are trying to find data and maybe they can't find it. But we don't want to be in a situation where our data users felt like they didn't have a voice in things. And when everything had to be done kind of retroactively, and we spent 2 years building to get to a point where AFF is now, people weren't really incredibly happy with it, but now as the years go by, you're used to it, and now we come and change it, and now everybody loves it. So it's the cycle of life, I get, for a dissemination system. So just quickly, why we're trying to do this. We are transitioning away from American Fact Finder. It will be decommissioned sometime in 2020. We're looking at the early part of it. We've called it retired now because it's not releasing new data. But it is there as an archive system for the old data that haven't been migrated over, but that also you're looking for, and then some of the features that might be there, might still be there if you're looking for address lookup or some of those other things. So with that transition, couple of things. One of the biggest questions, because most of the people I talk to are AFF devotees, and the biggest thing is, why aren't you doing this on AFF? It's already an established system. It's been there. We know how to use it. All of the data are there. Why are you starting from scratch? And part of this is that streamlining the access and also the API. So the streamlining the access is that what's happening is that the Census Bureau has a lot of tools, and AFF is just a tool. It's a big tool, but it's a tool to access data. What we're having is that we have a lot of tools, and they've kind of come up organically. People like them. There's certain tools for SAPI. There's certain tools for econ. There's things like Census Business Builder because people have asked for it, and people like them. The problem is it's just not for everything. You know, it might be for something. Census Business Builder has amazing maps, and the mapping feature is extremely powerful. But it has a handful, in the big scheme of census data, it only has a handful of variables that you can use. We want to be able to bring that to everybody, that everybody can have that kind of mapping feature. So taking the best of the current tools. Now streamlining the access as a tool, it sits on top of our website. So people come to the Census Bureau and we get a lot of questions about where's your data. You collect data. I know that do you disseminate it? Because I can't find it. When I search poverty or health insurance or something on census.gov, I get a lot of press releases, methodology reports, how you have different surveys and how they're different from one and the other, but I don't get any data. But I did find some in the press release. Is that all you have? It's because it's not searchable. And that's when we talk about having a platform, this enterprise platform. These are just kind of words to basically saying we're building something that everything can sit on and everything can be searchable. The end result is searchable off census.gov because we want to put everybody able to, people know it's census data. What's the first thing that you do? After you Google it, I understand. But after that, you go to the Census Bureau. Why wouldn't you go there and find your data from where it's at? But the customer experience and the things that we get back from the how are you liking things have been so poor based on those things. I can't find anything. So what we're trying to do is kind of integrate the data with those web pages, with those PDFs, with everything that you find on census.gov and put them on all one place. Since census.gov is a working site, we can't take it down, build it for a couple of years, and then release it. So we have a preview platform, and that's where data.census.gov comes in. So eventually, data.census.gov will go away, and you will find all of those things off the search box on census.gov. But we're not there yet. We're still working. But that's kind of the end goal, where we're trying to go. So with that, it reduces redundancies. People don't have to deliver. That doesn't necessarily mean a lot to y'all, but internally, the work that it takes, we could be doing other things, and resources are always scarce throughout all kinds of governments, federal to all the way down to local, and y'all know that. Now, the last thing is that the access to the Census API. So with AFF, great system. It is old, so we know that it's dying. There's certain servers and all of the hardware, everything has to be replaced because things have a shelf life. But aside from that, AFF was table-based. Everything, table-based. We delivered huge, as I was a data provider before I moved over to CEDSI to work. And that's just the group that's within census.gov that's working on dissemination. But everything was sent in a table. So what we had was people that were very knowledgeable about census data knew to look for, if they were looking for the poverty number, they could look at DPO3 for ACS, or maybe they can look at S1701, the subject table for poverty. So if somebody asked what's the poverty rate of some area, they would just be sent to a table that has about 300 lines in it. And that doesn't get people anything. One of my big jobs that I had to do before I moved over here was that I had to correct all the ills of the public. Not just the public, but internally in the Census Bureau, when someone was trying to release something and incorrectly used the wrong poverty estimate, because there's so many and there's some nuances to each of it. So that's what we're trying to do, is to provide some some education, but then also the API is what allows us to do single estimates, so that if there are those key indicators and people are asking, what's the population number? We just give you the population. It may not be what you want. You may want something else. You may want to use a different estimate. So if we're giving you a poverty estimate for the nation using CPS, which is the official poverty estimate, but for some reason you want to use something else, you want to use ACS or you want to use something, you can still do that. This is just the relevancy of what comes up. So we're trying to make it all available, as opposed to the AFF, where if, I don't know how y'all knew about different surveys there, but there's a different drop down for every survey. Nothing was integrated. So if you had a housing drop down for ACS, it's different than the housing drop down and that faceted filter that they had for American Housing Survey. Very confusing. It was only nuanced by maybe one different word or not. But what we're trying to do is put all of the data together so that people can make their own choices about what they want to use, but giving some sort of education to say, this is what we recommend, but go off and do whatever you want. And a lot of that is driven by the API too. Okay, any questions about what we're trying to do? The main idea? Okay. So, we talked about AFF decommissioning in 2020. When we talk about death and retirement, and kind of gets people a little upset when they talk about AFF, so we can talk about decommissioning. Maybe that'll be a little nicer. For some reason, I think in our AdCom area, they didn't like the word sunsetting, so we'll try decommissioning and see how that goes. So with that, we have to take all of the data that's in AFF, and we have to move it over to data.census.gov. But first, everything has to be in the API. So we can talk a little bit about the API. I'm not sure the level of use of the API or the understanding. Has anybody used it before? Our application programming interface. Okay, great. So I'll give you some basics about that in a little bit. So what our main thing is to put everything in the API, which is essentially kind of a repository for all data, and then it kind of siphons up that individual estimates. And based on a URL call that you create, that's how you can decide whether you want to pull a single estimate, or you can pull a table, or you can look at across geographies, like one estimate, but I want to see it for all counties in Oregon. Those are the kinds of things that you can do based on the URLs. Oops. Okay. So when it dies, you know you got to go to the next slide. So, okay, so we're trying to get that migration done by early 2020. I know that 1990 census was removed and kind of the data were lost. I don't know if anybody remembers that switchover, but we lost the 1990 census. We don't have the 1990 census in AFF, the old AFF. They didn't migrate it over. But we're not losing anything. We're not going to drop 2,000 because of some issue. We're trying to, our hope is to get everything available. But right now, and there's a lot of surveys that we have to get into the API, and then from there we want to do a lot of historical data and get into the API. But the first step is that we have this mammoth AFF contract system that has to be decommissioned. So we need to get the data from there and move it over. Something just to know for your own edification is why it's taking so long is that if it was being delivered directly, it would be a different story. But ACS, American Community Survey Office, doesn't have the resources to do that kind of stuff. They don't have that many people to be able to pull the old data and send it back to people. So what ends up happening is that we have to convert it over, and sometimes it's not so pretty. So there's a lot of review process, and so it's a much bigger chore than we prefer. But anyway, so just giving you that as a heads up so you know where we are with AFF, you know where we're trying to go with data.census.gov and eventually just census.gov. And then we've talked about those major releases that we just had. So this is just a quick snapshot. We definitely can talk about this more if you have some questions, but the API is our application programming interface. It's essentially that repository where all data are. If you look, it's the hub of everything. so that everything is being able to be gone through with the API. So anything that's being pulled or being used comes from the API, and that's where we want all of our data. We want to be able to put them there. And that uses their data services, metadata services, and geospatial. Those things are released eventually on census.gov through kind of our table display and single estimates. But at the top, it shows the third party, and that's really the power of the API, or people that are using it for third-party use. So if people want to come in, pull our data, and then create their own applications or tables or any dashboards, any of those things that they can. So that's just in a nutshell. Let's go through data.census.gov, and we can definitely circle back based on questions, okay? So some quick highlights that I wanted to go over. Now that we have a system and people are trying to use it, we've been doing a lot of kind of updates, and we'll continue to do those. We'll have another update in November with some new pushes, mainly to get ready for 5-year data release for ACS in the latter part of December. But basically making sure that you can use it now and you know how to use it and how to go around some roadblocks that you might be able to find. But the first thing, big question, is how do you use it? It's an open search bar, so what do? So you can type some things in. You can do a free form text, but please know we're not Google. We're not there yet. It's still being built. So we'll definitely give you some suggestions on how to easily go in and do some updates to it, or how to go in and kind of easily do some searches that you might be able to find. If things are a little bit more complicated, if you're looking for track level data or some collections of geography, go ahead and click the advanced search. And I guess a little tip is just that if you are looking, and I'd start with the single search, kind of just some basic searches, and if it's too much, if it doesn't, in 20 seconds, 30 seconds, switch to the advanced search. But here's some great ways that you can use it, that a lot of people who are using the data on either a regular basis or even just, every once in a while, that are using it for a class or for a grant proposal or something, can come in and kind of easily thing. So if you're looking at something like commuting, you can do a topic, a basic topic: commuting, poverty, health insurance, those types of, housing, those kinds of basic topics. And then geography, great way to look at it, kind of your entryway or entry point into there, and then I'll show you how you can do some filtering and some changing of the geographies and adding some things. You can also go in, and I feel like this hits about 95% of the data users that I'm frequent with. Not sure how well y'all know about the table IDs and that type of thing. But if you know your table ID, forget everything that I say and just type in your table ID. You'll be much happier there. I'll show you different ways that you can find the data and different things that you can do to use. But if you know your table ID, just type it in. Also, some things that are kind of remnants of AFF, you may or may not used it. I never did. But you can type things like DP, which is the data profiles. You get all 4 of those come up. You can also do things like ST, the subject tables, kinds of those things. Those are the shorthand for ACS. I'm going to focus mainly on ACS just because that's what we're having the bigger releases for. And the 2017 Economic Census release, while huge because of the NAICS, was only at the national level. So that's why if I keep going to ACS, that's the reasoning. If y'all want me to look at something else or talk about econ data, just let me know, okay? But also with the NAICS, there's also some quick ways. You can type in your NAICS, you can put in Oregon, you can do things that are kind of some shorthand of those bigger NAICS titles. How many of y'all use NAICS or anything like that? Okay. Okay, good. I don't want to keep talking about NAICS if y'all have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay, so so you can do shorthand things like gas stations and put it in and put some things in. Those are quick and easy ways to use the single search. Advanced search. If you have complex geographies, please use the advanced search. The single search is never going to be able to accommodate some of those crazier things like whether something is a sub-county versus a county, or a sub-county versus or county subdivision versus a place or something like that. Track level, those types of things. We're really looking at trying to do nation, state, county, place, zip codes, although zip codes aren't really working right now, but those are some of the main high level that we're looking for searches, the single search bar. So multiple topics, and we'll show you how to do some of those things. Also, if you want to prescribe a survey, if you only want to look at ACS data or decennial data, if you only want to look at that, you don't want to see anything else, go ahead and choose your survey. And then also population groups. I don't know how many people use ACS's SO201, some of those, the detailed race categories. Those aren't coming out until mid-October, but those things are available, and that's right now only available through single search. We're working for advanced search. We're working on single search to be able to type in some of those things like Colombian and then be able to pull up that Hispanic group in as its own population, like what SO201 does. But right now we're not there yet. But when we are, we'll make sure that those things are updated. And please, as we go, if y'all have questions, we can be pretty loose about this with 90 minutes, right? So if y'all have questions, let me know and we can go back and forth, okay? All right, so with advanced search, definitely use it for things like tracts for all counties. If you're looking for those what we call collections of geographies, we don't have many. We're working on getting more of those in, but those are the places to find it. Multiple topics, we talked about that, and surveys. So here, it's a lot to take in, but just, on the surface level. But basically, this just shows you how you can kind of go through and choose a topic and choose commuting and then choose earnings and then going to your geography and finding that and then picking a year. So all of those things can happen. And then the same thing with the NAICS. If you want to go through all of the NAICS and find the final NAICS that you want, and then the prescribed geography, you can definitely do that, especially if you don't know that number right off the top of your head. So the next thing that we're working on is to have something that would be available in census.gov. It's very similar to some of the displays and bigger search engines by design, to be able to have a key estimate when available, and then also showing you how you can use the data in different ways and how you can view the data. So one being tables, what people are most used to, and then also being able to pull up that data through the maps. And then on the right-hand side, we have our geography profiles that we're working on, which are kind of high level, very similar to the Census Bureau's quick facts, if you used those before. That's what we're trying to do, to be able to show more of a visualization and also kind of an example of what you can do with the API. All right, so here's how you find the geography profile. If you just put in a geography, it'll be in the drop down. And then it's also on that main search page. It's on the right-hand side that you can choose. Now, customizing your table. Once you get a table, one of the big things is that I don't actually think of changing the year or changing the geography necessarily customizing it, but it is, or downloading it. But that's what we kind of consider to be all kinds of customizing. We're changing the data in some way. So you can click on customizing table, and then you get this iconography that's all at the top, different ways that you can adjust the table, and also how you can download. Download being a big one. I'm sure we'll have a lot to say if people have used the data or if needed it for 2018, some thoughts that y'all have on the download or the print. But there's two ways of doing it right now, where you can get a flat CSV file, which is more for a machine-read kind of file. Some people love that and really need it. Other people, not so much. They want something that they can see that looks exactly like the table. And we don't have that yet. We do not have a PDF option. That is a huge source of concern from people. Definitely want to talk to y'all about it in a minute. But what we've tried to do is to be able to do an export to Excel that gives you somewhat of an idea of the tables. You have to clean it up a little bit, but it's at least something that we can offer right now. And then you can get to the data notes, also more data if you want to go to the FTP site. And then mapping. The biggest difference with the mapping, I think, is that you can do a drop down of the table so you can choose any of the line variables of a table. You might have to scroll a long time because those data profiles are quite big, but you can remap everything that's available there. That's, I think that's a nice feature, different ways that you can use that. Also kind of trying to show the power of the API and not having to redeliver things over and over and over. So that was one of the big issues with AFF, is that, you know, because it's basically delivering a data set, and then if you wanted to manipulate that data set, that's a new data set. So things were very, very large in an already very large collection of estimates. And so what the API wants to be able to do and is able to do, and what we're trying to do with data.census.gov, is that you can deliver it one way and we can show you table ways, but then there's lots of views that you can have. And one of those views is to be able to kind of create your own geographic comparison table. I don't know how many people use GCTs. Well, good, then you won't yell at me about taking them away from you. So we're no longer producing them. Exactly, now you're like, well, I'm gonna yell at you anyway, so that's okay, I'll just add it to that. But what it was basically is taking a single estimate. For ACS, there's only 80 of them, an estimate, percent poverty, and then it would be, you can look at it across. So percent poverty for, you know, a school district, and you can look at it all school districts in Oregon, all counties in Oregon, that type of thing. Problem was, it's a static table, so you couldn't change those variables, you couldn't do this. So this is a way to get those and actually see it in a table view by pulling up a collection of geographies like all states that's here and choosing the variable, and then you can, on the bottom left side, do view table, and then you pull up a table that's kind of the GCT. So we're trying to get into this more flexible environment. We don't want you to lose any of your capabilities, any of the things that you need. I know probably with this, we need to have a way to embed it, a way to print it, because people might be using that. But we want to have something that's very, very flexible. You know, I get lots of questions and people are like, why can't you just put things in a cube and then from there just be able to pivot it? Completely agree, but there's a lot behind that. And if anybody knows anything about data products from Census Bureau, a lot of our data products have carried over, especially ACS, since the 1940 census. So everything is very much ritualistically how it's been, because it's always that big fear of taking away something that somebody might have used, and all we're going to do is kind of add and add. But we've gotten to the point that we can't add anymore. We have to redesign. We have to be smarter about what we're trying to do, because we don't have the space, we don't have the resources to be able to do some of those things. So these are some of the ways that we're trying to show the power of using the API and being able to manipulate the data. The data has been tabulated. It can do whatever you want. It's not changing anything. It's just it's just displays and how you're kind of packaging them and showing them. All right, so this is staying connected. We can, basically it's on the landing page just saying there's a lot of changes. There's probably a lot of questions. Well, I know there's a lot of questions in general. Please use some of these resources. I'll show you in the end where we have a new web page on census.gov that you can go to and just find resources and information and help. And always, you're welcome to contact me. You're welcome to contact the sedsci.feedback@census.gov. Those are always monitored. We have more people so that you can get your answers, questions answered faster. And then you always have Heidi, who's your DDS support, who's kind of on the ground and local that can help. And our relationship is very close with the DDS and also Charles. But making sure that if there's question, Charles is talking to Heidi or to me or to finding out the answer. And if y'all need, kind of on the ground support, there's Heidi. And if she needs more, we kind of just want to make sure that y'all are covered. But kind of the first thing is to know who to go to. I feel like it's just Charles, right? So we'll talk about that later. But anyway, right before I do a demo, I just wanted to see if anyone had some questions. I know this is pretty dry stuff, kind of walking through, but I just wanted to kind of give you a background of what we were doing and where we are and how to use it. But does anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, you talked about AFF, gradually going away. But what about some of the other data products? You mentioned, for instance, Census Business Builder. Is all that capability going to be folded into data.census.gov?
So we're working on our mapping feature to have kind of that Census Business Builder feel to it. I know we're still working on our mapping, and they've come a long way with their mapping and their software. But that's nothing other than AFF is officially retiring right now. Nothing, you don't have to worry about that. But we are trying to pull those capabilities in so that it can be kind of across the board for all the estimates. And it's only my feeling, because we haven't really talked about it, I'm assuming that as things kind of gradually die off with, old software, old hardware and that type of thing, that eventually if this, to go here, but we don't have any strong dates. So don't worry if you're, and I have a hard time, I don't know if y'all know that Andy Haight is very, obviously with Census Business Builder, he would put up such a huge fight. So I don't think it's even worth it to even try to do anything like that. I know that there's needs for some short, small apps sometimes, right? To have the phone where you don't go through all of the data and you don't have to find it, but you just have that handful of estimates that people can use. And so we're not trying to take it away, but we know that people love those maps, and so we want people to be able to have the option of having other data. Go ahead.
I might have missed, so you were the commission on AFF and in bringing this live. So is there a overlap period for people to transition, and do you get a sense of what range that would be?
So we've had an overlap. This is, so the 2016 ACS and the 2017 ACS were dual deliveries with data.census.gov and AFF. And so we've done that, and so that was kind of our overlap period and getting people more and more. The trouble is that as much as you can say that something's going away until it hits you in the face. I mean, I'm no different than any of y'all. I'm not going to check on something if, unless it's, my job, something I have to do, right? That it's, dependent on my feedback to be able to do something. But especially if you, use it once a month or twice a month, you're just kind of hedging your bets and seeing where it is. And I feel like that's a good portion of people that maybe knew it was coming, but hasn't necessarily jumped in and had to. And that's why we've been kind of doing a much bigger push starting in April to make sure that we know that. And some is, associated with monies, and when people decided, when our higher ups have finally said we can't handle 2 dissemination systems, that AFF has to go and we have to go, then that changes everything. If it were up to me and the rest of the people that work in our group, I think we'd be very delighted to have AFF continue so that we could build and not have some issues. I kind of hedge a little bit with that because we do have resources that work on AFF, and anytime you're doing dual, it kind of takes them away from really focusing on this. But, you know, if push comes to shove, it would be nice to have this backup system of AFF. But it's kind of like it's got to be one or the other. We can't afford to keep it, and so let's push forward. And so it's one of the reasons of really trying to get, you know, what do you need? What's missing? We know that it's not where where we want it to be. You know, I think it's getting there, but what is missing, and what would you like to see? Go ahead.
Kind of following up on that question, is there a certain error rate that the Census Bureau is aiming towards? I've tried using data.census.gov in this transition period, and a lot of times the reason that I end up going back to FactFinder is because the data that I'm looking for can't be pulled. So I send an error message to the email that's there at Census. Many times that error can't be reproduced on their side. So is there sort of an target error rate that you're going for, so that or is there just a final cutoff date when FactFinder is no longer?
So it's two separate things. We've already retired AFF. The last release was the pop estimates in June. We don't have that contract that was live support, basically, of real-time production. That is a contract and that was another thing with contracts. There's a contract and there's an extension period, and beyond that, it has to be a whole other contract. And so we were just put up against, we can't go forward. So AFF has been retired, so it's two separate things. We don't have it to go back to, and we couldn't, even if it's sitting as an archive. It's like a very expensive car that you can see, but you can't drive it, I guess. But it's there. It's got all the bells and whistles that it had for the old data, but it's not producing new things. So that's a difference. So we can't just go in because the error rate is high and go back to AFF for that. And then the decommissioning has to do with making sure that the data that are there have been migrated over successfully and that people can access those data. And one of the questions too is from data providers, what do you need? There's a lot, and that's kind of one of the things that when we're doing, go ahead. Oh, but like the traveling band show is to really try to find out and let people know where we are in our position. Everybody says they want everything. I understand that. But really, when your push comes to shove, what do you want? Data providers are saying they want everything that they had in AFF before. But do you really? Do you really want everything? You had a lot of preliminary data and that type of thing. Go ahead.
So, yeah, I raised my hand right when you said, what do you need? So
Okay.
I was glad to hear that, there's more improvements coming in November before the five-year release. So I'll give you my two biggest things on my wish list. That is being able to select all tracks in a county or state, just like you can now select all counties. Selecting all tracks might be the most common thing that my colleagues and I do. And the other thing is when you do select all counties, that they come out in alphabetical order.
So there's some to unpack there. Okay, so a couple things. Yes, we know. Oh, oh sure. I'm sorry. Sure. So Charles just saying there's a couple of pain points that he has. One, that we don't have all of those collections of geographies. One being all tracks. So let's talk about that one first. So yes, we know that's by far the amount of feedback that we just get that it says, I can't use this because I don't have collections. Absolutely. And we send people to AFF every single time. That is where they are. It's very, very difficult for whatever reason. I don't know why, because to create these pseudo geographies, probably because our extremely complex way of doing geographies and nesting them at the Census Bureau. So we have a list of things that we absolutely need for 5-year. One is definitely by far tracks. People want tracks. So tracks for the nation, which is just going to be a download because you can't pull that much, in a table display. And then tracts for a state, and then tracts by county is what we're looking at right now. I know there's more tracts by place, tracts by, there's other ways of doing them, but I'm trying to give them the highest and most important. I don't want to give them 50 and say they're all important, because they'll pick the easiest ones. Why wouldn't they? The ones that are easily kind of nested, but trying to give them a real prioritized list of things that have to be done, and one of them, by far, then is tracts. We also had, with this last release, we had congressional districts, but for some reason they didn't do it for 116, which is the one that you need to have it done for. So we're working on getting that pushed. And then metros. Wasn't available for metros. Huge problem. My expectation was that it would be there, at least for those. There's some others that people use for 1 year, like the school districts and that type of thing, but they're not as complete as the metros that people really need. So, but those definitely are some that we're working on getting, and we hope to have it pushed for the November release. And then alphabetical. Okay. So what we're doing at the Census Bureau is called Enterprise. So what we're trying to do, because everybody did everything disjointed. One per ACS released their data over here, and then Econ did it over here, and then CPS did a press release, and then some people did in the API. It was all whatever anybody wanted to do. And if you were a data provider, it was great because they sent you a link so you know exactly where to do it and you could bookmark it. But again, it goes back to that, if people are trying to find it, they can't find it and they don't know anything about it. So one of the things is this Enterprise. Part of Enterprise is the systems. If we all have the same systems that we use, or the software, the hardware behind things, it streamlines things. One of the things, our system for a database is Oracle. We moved from MySQL to Oracle, and it has been problematic. It's not as flexible as it's needed for the API. Thank you very much. You sound exactly like every single developer that we have, that everyone's like, what are you doing? And so we've been trying to do everything that we can without the detriment of the API. That's the big issue there too, is that, sorry, lots of feedback there. So with the API, you can definitely do things on the front end. You can add, for the UI, you can add some organization and some sort and making sure it's there. And we've done that with the tables. Although with the DPs, for some reason, there's a defect in that we found that it was bringing up like 32. But basically, Oracle doesn't prescribe an order. You give them an order and they're just like, whatever, this is the order, I'm gonna do whatever I want. I'm gonna pull back and give you what I want, but you're gonna get the data. It's just not in the order that we want. MySQL is different. It prescribed that order. So that's one thing. So we're working on that. When we found that and found that we couldn't move over, we were already on the train of moving things, and you couldn't just back up because we were too close to ACS. So we're now trying to figure out what we can do, and if we have to go back, or if we can put some things on the end. So that's gonna be an issue. When you pull all counties, it might start with a W, or it might start with an M. It just pulls back whichever way. It's infuriating, I know, and I'm sorry. I wish that wasn't the case. It's kind of like the bane in all of our existence, because we know that it shouldn't be there. It was just kind of something we have to still argue about, and try to let people know that that's not the way to go, especially with something as flexible as the API, to be able to do things. I feel like you had something else.
Yeah, I have a few questions, but
Mm-hmm. So that's a different story. So what we're doing is we just take the data that's produced and tabulated by the data provider. So ACS decides it, Econ decides it, and they send it. Right now, your table display, your table ID is not changing. Would we like it to change? Absolutely, because it's really hard to see on one side, to see a column that has 15 columns on it. We've all seen that in AFF. It's really difficult. It's not really table appropriate, for for viewing. But as of right now, no. There's no thoughts to changing anything. And that's a lot of the kickback that we get is trying to decide whether it's, especially people that aren't, not like y'all, but other people will be like, I don't like the table display, or that title is super long. And I'm like, that's just what we get and we're showing it. But no, those things are not gonna change. So if you know your table IDs, please use them. Please pull them up. Easy ways to find things. But as of right now, no. Again, yes, we would like to have things in a more standardized fashion and put in a cube, although with hierarchical data, I have a hard time with what a cube would really look like with that, but it would at least make things where you could kind of pivot. It would make it so that you can create your own tables a little bit easier and not have whatever is, from the static tables. Go ahead, you had another? Are you sure? Okay, go ahead.
Comparative economic, comparative economic profiles on.
From ACS?
Yes.
Yes, so that's another thing. ACS staggered their release this year, and I'm not sure how widely known that is from people. So because of the shutdown, they weren't able to release everything for the 1 year. They didn't have time. We were shut down for 6 weeks, something like that. So we only released data profiles, detail tables, and then they were able to do the comparison profiles. So that was released last week. So that's available. Your subject tables and not the GCTs, but the the selected population tables are what's going to be available. I think it's October 17th, right? Is that good? Do you have anything else? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So why don't I show you a quick demo, and then we can go from there. And if you have questions, just please stop me. Is that fair? Okay. What? Oh, this one? Okay. Okay. All right, so this is the website, as you're aware. We talked about the landing page and things that are a little bit lower. You have some direct links to some things for some questions, like what is data.census.gov? It directs you to our Ask Census. So it's kind of our frequently asked questions from census.gov. But if you scroll on the left-hand side, I always miss it. There it is. You can have the drop down, and it's just different questions that people have that maybe might hit to some of the things that you need, just to know where things are, where you might be able to get some things. So just wanted to show you that, and then I'll show you our web page in 1 second. We also have a web page. So if you go under Explore Data, and right here, the first one is Explore Data Main. If you go right there, in the middle, there's a whatiscensus.gov. If you click on that, it takes you to a page, and it's just a page of resources we're working on right now. It gives you a link to obviously our feedback, but then also frequently asked questions. It's still being built, so we're working on getting a link to all the FAQs. Here are some of our data gems, which are from our data dissemination specialist, but it highlights the information about data.census.gov. We have a new one that's coming out too. our webinars at the bottom, but then also our downloads and how-tos. So if people have questions about things like how to get AIA in population groups, it's just kind of quick one-pagers on how to get there. We're waiting for them. We have about 15 more to be posted. But this is just if you're in a pinch or if you know people, I don't know how many people are training other people or people, are coming to you from your office or whomever to ask you about how to use the site. Just trying to provide resources so that people can kind of easily get to things. Okay, enough of that. All right. Okay, so some of the first things we can do, we talked about doing a search first. So you can do this advanced search or you can do those quick searches we talked about. We talked about doing something like a topic and then, a place. So if we wanted to do like commuting in Portland, Oregon, so it comes up, click on there. And then from there, it takes you to that all results page that we talked about that kind of is your entry point to other areas. So there's a single the single estimate of it's 25.8 minutes on average as a travel commute time in Portland. Here's also just gives you the first table results. Gives you some other, there's 148, also gives you a map of Portland if you want to look at things like that. And then at the very bottom, we link with census.gov and use their third-party Bing to pull up the pages, like the web pages that may have come up. Bing has not been helpful lately, so they've been down some, so we'll see if something else comes up with the pages. But here is that profile I talked about. It just gives you a high-level look of a geography. If you want to go somewhere, if people are asking some things, you're welcome to come in and check those things out, and then you can scroll and look at some other things from there. So, all right, let's just go back. So from here, just want to show you the table display. You can click on the table. You can also click on if there's an estimate there. So here's your table. Again, it's the same table that was in AFF. That they haven't changed their structure, but that's there. A couple of things if you can't see what's in the label, because the Census Bureau people have a lot to say, especially on their labels. So they're very, very complete, but because of that, sometimes you can't see them. So two things. You can hover over it and see what the label is, or this software is called AG Grid, and it's very similar to Excel, where you can expand the cells that way to be able to see everything. So from here, couple things that you can do. You can go in and change the year if you want to look at, last year or something like that. Similar to AFF, you can't pull up the table at the same time of the different years. The reason for that is that every year that table could be redefined in some way. They could take out some estimates or move some things. So that's why you can't get, I know it would be so nice to be able to just pull the years. We get lots of requests for that. You can do the geographies because it's all the same metadata and the same stub of it, but that's why the years. So we're trying to make it a little bit easier. AFF had that click on the side where you can quickly jump from table to table to try to memorize the lines, to try to do a little, ad hoc comparison. So this is trying to get to that, to do that. Okay, so a few things. You can go ahead and download if you like that table so much and you want to download it. You can click a few things, so this is kind of a multiple download. If you also want the commuting subject table from there. One thing to note, you have to click this download selected. No one remembers that. We'll have to take that back to the developers. But then from here, you can decide, and you decide not just the year, but also the data set that you want. So you can mix it up, figure out what you want. If you want this one as well, and then download it. But remember, this is the CSV file, so it's a flat file. Again, some people love it, some people don't want anything to do with it. So we'll see what y'all think. And then just pull it up. So a computer would love looking at this. So it puts it all in one line. Easy to read if you make sure that you look at the labels and see what the labels are saying for the estimate. But again, not what everybody's looking for. So that's the CSV. Anybody like the CSV? Thank you, Charles. I appreciate it. Thank you. Lots of y'all. I'm going to go back and be like, nobody wanted PDF. It was great. Oh, it's not? Oh, shoot.
Let me try for just one
Oh,
second.
yeah. Well, ratings, anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, when it comes to, what do they call it?
Oh, it's like he's doing double
Fun.
time.
Changing the table display. In AFF, you can switch columns and rows if you want to. Can you do that in the, okay.
I feel like it's kind of clunky, but you can do it. So let's, and some of it's just kind of going in and playing with it yourself and then seeing if you can do it or not. And when I go back to the slide deck. Okay. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let's see. Hi. Could you demonstrate making some customizations to the table and how that translates when you export it?
Okay, sure. Okay, so we did the download, close download. Oh, let me show you how to customize the table. And then you wanted to hide, right? So you could go in and do some hiding if you don't want to see like margins of error and percent and all of that. There isn't an apply button, please note. Everyone's looking for it. If you actually just get out of the box, it applies, but it's very unsettling for some people. I'm just being perfectly honest. So that's a way to hide, and then you can like unhide it. You can do all columns, unhide it, and then you can move the columns like that if you want to move them over. There's a way to get this column to stay put, but I'm never able to do it without switching everything over. So I don't ever show that. This was the one time for you. Remember that. But no, because I just can't do it. And if I can't do it and I work with it all the time, y'all probably be able to do it without a problem, but just in general. But what we're trying to do is be able to hide this, hold this column so that when you slide over, you still see, there's no more to slide over, but that you still see that frozen column. And that's kind of a workaround because we have 508 issues, which is the ability to make sure that your websites are available to be seen by people with sight impairments. And that freeze column does something that I can't. I can get more information about it, but I know that I was disappointed when I heard about it. So we get a lot of that. But you can move those tables around like that. Is that what you were asking? Is that good? Who was that at the Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. And then you were asking about just customization, right? What it looks like when you export it. Okay. Let's do that. Okay. So we moved it around. You can transpose the tables. It looks awful on an ACS table, but if that's what you like, There it is. But then you can, let's stop transposing it. I don't want to do that anymore. You can filter things if you want. This is actually better for like econ tables. They're more of that flat file kind of thing. But then, so let me take out the margins of error. So one thing that you can do, so two things. So one thing, no two. So there's the first thing. If you manipulate the table like we just did, and then you go to download it right here, it will not give you what you want. I'm sorry, I finally answered your question. It'll take a while. Just circle me back. That's all you need to do. But it will not, because it's ingrained in the system. It's only going to show you that which was originally delivered. We know that people don't like it. I know. People don't like it. But let me show you a workaround. There's hope. Hold on. So you have it like this. Now, this is something that's that workaround of trying to get something like the PDF. In no way is it a PDF, but just trying to look and see the table in one place. So you go just to the table, right-click, go down to Export Table, Export to Excel. Pull it up. So it's hard on a derived product because of all the stuff. But when you finally get the estimates, there you go. It's a little better. It's better than the CSV if you want to look at something, and you can then go in and do some edits and stuff like that. But this will keep your customization because you're exporting it. Go ahead.
Those are still being read in its text, not data, correct?
Right. And that's a good point, though. But yeah, that's it. We have a lot of amazing developers. We have a lot of people who are very, conscious of the next level, the next IT, or the next wave. But one of their big misses was nobody prints a table. No one needs to download something in the actual image. Why do it when you can just share the link and then they can pull up the table themselves? I'm like, you have no idea how many people print out a table. It's crazy. People print them out. Do y'all print out your tables? Any of y'all? So, well, never mind. Again, I'm going to be like, overwhelmingly, Salem does not need a PDF. Except Charles.
These are pretty sophisticated users here, but people call me on the
No,
phone,
it's true.
And rather than walk them through the download and everything, sometimes I just have to print something and send it to them.
No, I agree. I won't. I'm going to say everybody here loved a PDF. They want one. So, and say whatever they want. But anyway, just kidding. But no, people want that capability, and they, even people who are pretty sophisticated at the Census Bureau, it's crazy the amount of people that'll print off a table and just, carry it to a meeting or something like that. We have a bigger issue, and I think a bigger problem, other than people's just what they like to do, is that for legal reasons, we have a lot of times for EEO, we have a lot of things that we produce and release data for lawsuits, for other reasons, and they need a table to be officially printed. And this you have to add. It's the census, but you have to add all of that kind of stuff to it. So we know we're working. On something, an image. It probably won't be a PDF. PDF is kind of antiquated, but be able to have an image of the table is really all you need, right? So, okay. Any other questions about downloads or anything like that? Go ahead. So she is asking if there's specific browsers to use. So essentially, you should be able to pull it up on everything. It was built for Chrome. But there is a defect in one of the versions of Chrome in the advanced search where you do a filter. It's going to be pushed out next week. No, it should be pushed out sometime this week. We found a defect right before ACS, but the data providers didn't want to change the code they wanted it stable for their reviews and stuff like that. So there was an issue, and I'll show you that. Anything else about download or anything before we move? Go ahead.
Back up a little bit, and when you pulled up commuting for Portland, I didn't see any link to the on the map data. So does census.gov not coordinated with on the map for commuting data?
So this is only pulling up ACS. It's pulling, so our biggest priority is making sure that it's not a replacement for AFF. It's more than that, but right now we just have to get all of the functionality and move over from AFF. So we don't have on the map. We don't have a lot of those other ones that have been put in, and that's kind of once we have AFF, then we're gonna start working on other areas. This is definitely multi-year work that we're doing. So it makes it hard because you're still gonna have to be going back and forth and looking for other things. And some things may not necessarily, they'll be part of the platform, but maybe it's when we're with census.gov. So you might look at it and find it as a tool off census.gov. But no, that's a good question. It is kind of a little nebulous with that. Sorry about that. Anybody else real quick? Go ahead. I know, it's like, should I ask a question or should I wait for the mic? I don't know.
When you first pulled up the table, you have that set of, I guess, related tables or similar topic tables.
Right.
What controls what comes up there? Because sometimes I get a good subset of related tables, and sometimes I just get stuff that is so nebulously related that it's in the way. Is there something about the URL that determines what's going to come up over there?
So mainly I work on the search and trying to do search relevancy to make sure that those data come up first. That's important. But we're fighting against tagging, and tagging is a remnant of AFF when you tag tables, but it's also how you do faceted filtering. You have to tag something to those drop downs to be able to see. And I never even showed y'all the faceted filtering, but here, from like the drop downs for things to be under health or health insurance as opposed to something else. So it has to be tagged. And sometimes when you type in something that's not as easy as education and income, it's more of like your structure built with something else. That tag is almost fighting against it. So we need to pull all of the tags out and then redo it. It's just a massive job because of how many tables there are. But I think that's what you're getting to. But basically because in some cases like that, when you have crosses, it's better to almost have an entity recognition, which is what a single search is, that's built off. We can't do machine learning because we have 100%. Google doesn't have 100%. Google has, what floats to the top, how many times people hit things, but we have 100% in the fact that CPS, national data, are the poverty and health insurance official estimates. But if we were going the Google route, it would be ACS because people hit that over and over because it has the most coverage, it has the most breadth. And so we're having to push curation almost onto that. And then we have tagging. And in many cases, if we stripped all of it out, if you can't do an entity search, it does a text search, and that does a great job of looking at a title and being able to cross those two. But we can talk offline, or you can send me an email of those specifics, and I can drill down a little bit more and let you know exactly what. And if nothing else, say, you're doing it right, but for this purposes right now, this is how to get your answer. Is that fair? Okay. Anybody have anything else? Okay. Quickly, let me just show you, like insurance, we just talked about it, like there. This is how you kind of add some things. We talked about the geography. So there's two ways of getting geography with the summary level, the toggle on and the toggle off. Right now, I would suggest using the toggle on, although we're getting a push pretty soon, because what happened was there was two code bases, and the toggle on had the complete list, and the toggle off, there were a few times we found some missing things. And so just for your own edification, that's a way to do it. If you know our summary levels, it's a great way to go. I know that I use, you know, what did I do? There we go. I know that I use 160 for place. I didn't know it was called place within the state, but there you go. If you go down here to Oregon, you can do all places. You can take that out and do Salem. See if that's found. I think it's still pushing something else out. So we do Oregon. And then you can also go in, okay, let me show you. Take it toggle off. The purpose of the toggle off is the argument that I got that so many people said, I don't know the summary levels well enough to pick which one to use. I completely agree with that. There are definitely times when people are coming in and they just know that they want a metro area. So you scroll down to metro area. There we go. And then from there, you can find what you were looking for. Then there's the flip side. If you're used to the metro area, I'm like, I don't know what it's called, but I always use 310. So we're trying to be able to at least hit on both areas to find some things. So from here, I'm not sure why it's thinking. Portland City, okay. Oh, well, let's see. So if we do Portland, so you should be able to add to it. There we go. And I didn't tell you, whenever you do metro, I would strongly suggest picking a year because metros are redefined. So you might have Portland, and then you might have Vancouver, Portland, and you might have, depending on the principal city, we can go on and talk about that at a later time. But just as your big sister trying to help you out, I would do that. So then from here, you click on search. And then you can look at, and I'm not sure what I clicked on because it is pulling up. Oops. Clear them. And that's the thing. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, so just clear it if you need to. You can go to a sample count, but nobody wants that. You can go in and pull, we talked about your own, doing your numbers that you want, the table ID. So click from there. And then my suggestion is to go to filter from here and then choose, you know, whatever you want to go from there, just because you're already on there and moving things around. We definitely have a defect in that you can't subscribe the table ID and then do a lot of mixing. So if do it from here, get on the table and then put in the filter, because if not, it's going to push you to the relevancy that may not be that name. But we're working on that one. Let me see what else. Maps. We can do all. Let's do B19001, all counties in Oregon. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, so what we're looking at right here, it defaults to the 1 year. It should go to the 5 year because of full coverage, right? But you can change it and see whatever you want. And then from here, it's B19. 001, this default is that first estimate, which is typically just your universe. So you'll want to go in and let's see how many people have the highest incomes and then go from there. This is where you can do, if you customize the map and view table, this is where you could pull up those kind of pseudo GCTs, those geographic comparison tables, because you're looking at all of the counties in Oregon, and here's your estimate. Then you can flip back and go to the real table. Does anyone have anything else you want me to show you now?
Is there a way to customize the breaks for that map?
There is. It's like I planted him to. Why, yes, you can, right here. So if you click on, it's a cog, but it looks like an abstract flower sometimes. If you click on that, you can change the color palette, because it's the big things. Change the color. And then you can change your breaks if you want to do equal interval or quantile. And then you can number of classes, that type of thing from there. Okay, so let me think. You can't. So we're working on getting that. When it says download, goes back to download. I don't know if it'll pull it back up for me. But you can go to download, and it'll download the table for you, and that's disappointing when you are on the mapping feature and you think that it's all maps. So from here, yeah, you can. Here's the 5-year, and then you can go down to download, and it's just the table. It's so disappointing, I know. So try to let people know before they get too mad. It's like I'm always like half a step behind everybody getting mad. So, but we're trying. So any other questions people want to see how to use, or things, pain spots that you had, things that you can't stand? Go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up question on the maps. Will exporting maps become available, and if so, when?
So we do something called the agile process, which is based on 2-month intervals of planning. Very difficult, especially when people are used to having planning in the government of 5 and 10 years from now. But our short cycles of planning are within 2 months. We have a ways to go with the mapping feature. You know, sometimes it kind of sticks and do all that. I'm not sure. I would hope it would be sometime in the spring, but I will let you know. I know we're going to have some updates because SAPI is being released. That's a small area income and poverty estimates, and they do school district boundaries. So we have to have more of a map that people can drill down and actually verify their boundaries. So hopefully there'll be some updates with maps, and I'll definitely let them know that you're interested in being able to download a map. And I'm thinking something like embedding a map is nice, you know, some of those things instead of maybe just a straight download, just to be able to take it and plop it someplace else. Those kind of things kind of work, or do you need straight download? Is it more to print or more to maybe just send to somebody, or? I need to do it all. Okay. No, that's good. And that's what we want. We want the flexibility that people want. You know, some people want to print it, and some, you know, we have some embed features that we're trying. Now it's never going to let me not download this. Okay. That people have, but just to know what you need.
I think the option of the map being a JPEG rather than, it does not need to be a PDF.
Right.
Image, then it can be embedded in, other documents.
Right. Yeah, I think the first step is to make it like embeddable, right? And then from there you can be able to print it. So, no, I'll definitely let them know. It's important to hear some of these things, because we get, caught up in people saying they want their collections and how important it is. And I'm like, I know, that's a dire, there's no way you're going to click on how many thousands of tracks, but some of those things really do help with knowing about like download and stuff for the maps.
And labeling on names and or values on the map, is that already a feature?
So we have some things. Let me show you what we got, and you see if that. So if you have to drill down into it, see it says Oregon. Is that enough? It's like you want the world. So yeah, you can drill down from there, and then you can do, if you wanted to look at tracks, they get so small, when you can change some things to look at. One other thing that's good, and let me show you. Let's go back to this. If you're looking for collections, it's not ideal, and you definitely can't do it with with tracks. But if you're looking at something, you can go in and grab things from here. And I just grabbed something that was already done, so that's not gonna help anything. Now it's confused and doesn't know what to do. But if you move over here and go to Wyoming, because that's the best place to grab a bunch of things, you could grab it like this, because it's perfectly square. It only works for square states, but you can get it, and then you can go in and individually select them around it. The things that you're missing. It's not ideal. That's not the way we want you to have to do it from now on, but it's a way of kind of trying to get around some of these things. And then from there, it also is nice if y'all are doing like, a 3-district area or something like that, where you can individually select it and it'd be added to your grouping. But that's some of the ways to get around the not having those collections. But like I said, we're hoping to have a good chunk of them, and definitely the ones that are the most needed available then. Any other questions?
What about the shapefile feature?
Ooh. So yes, AFF had a great shapefile feature, and that was something done by IBM. That isn't what was done by Geo, and so we're trying to get Geo on board and knowing that what they did before is not 100% what everybody wants, that they want a little bit of extra, that they got used to AFF. But we have, I don't know if I can switch to my slide deck now. Gosh, I don't know if it's going to show or not, so everyone can see it? No one can talk. Okay, so we're trying. It's the same thing with things like the address locator. We know people really like that. We're working on getting something like that. Sorry.
No, we're gonna figure this out at break.
And then also, so we know we have collections that we're working on. There's some ways that you can get around that from the API, or you can pull them from the FTP site. And if y'all have questions, I know our time is short, let me know, and I can show you. We're working on doing a video to show you how to get how to get like all metros easily through the API, so that it's not in a table, but at least gives you the data. We'll have some resources behind that hopefully should be out later this week, if not early next week. So we know those are issues. Some other road bumps on the road. We know that, the collections are by far the biggest one. Then it comes to like the downloads, that people want more of a visual way of seeing things. And then the address locator, I would go for AFF. We have some, if you go, I'm gonna change it, I'm just gonna stay. We'll just stay. If we go to those FAQs, there's one that says how to, there's one about shapefiles, and it gives you how to use our geocoder. It's kind of clunky, and it's not as nice as AFF, but you definitely can use it. And we know that y'all would like something similar to AFF, but I would use it until you can't, and then hopefully we'll be able to push something else. We just have to get Geo on board to do all that extra work that AFF made y'all accustomed to. So, and then also like the address locator, make sure you use AFF, or you can use the geolocator for this, the shapefiles from Geo. But we can give you how to use the geolocator for those things. So it's not a perfect system, but I would like to hear if y'all have thoughts or comments or things that you need because I want to take back, or big pain points, and we can, always take it offline. You're welcome to send us an email. Here's the information about the feedback. Here's also the information on like tutorials, and here's your information on feedback. And then I'll leave right here. Here's my direct information. Definitely be able to give you Heidi's information. You have Charles' information, and I'm sure you're going to send this all out, so we'll make sure we have those things. If that's okay.
All these presentations, we repeat that.
Oh yeah, so they're going to post all of these presentations. I'll go in and go ahead and add Heidi's information to make sure that you can contact her as well. But just anyone you contact, I think we just want you to be able to answer, get the questions that you have. We were able to hire a bunch of people, at least in my area, so I have more colleagues, that when people send things to sudside.feedback, which is here our feedback email, it's really turned into more of how to or where this is, but we're able to get you answers much, much quicker. So please use that as a resource. If you have questions, we will definitely answer. I know that there's issues with if you can't replicate things. And I'm sorry, I get the same problems. I have issues and it's not they can't replicate it. And I'm like, just note it down. So if that happens again, we know that there's a bug somewhere. So please just continue to let us know, and we'll make sure that gets sent up, because we want you to be happy with this dissemination system, and we want you to stick around as we have all these bumps in the roads, but we do appreciate it. Any other things, questions? Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Kaneen mentioned a couple of times, Heidi's name. Heidi, if you were here last year, I think, did you present a session last year? Yeah, so we have a lot of people, of course, gearing up for 2020. The Census Bureau has hired people to promote the census, and we'll meet at least one of those people this afternoon. But Heidi is here evergreen, as they like to say at the Census Bureau. She's here in the Northwest throughout the decade, and she's been our data dissemination specialist. So she's covering Oregon, Washington, and Alaska, and giving presentations and showing people how to use Census Bureau tools. But now she's also transitioning to doing a lot with statistics in schools. So how many of you have heard of that program? Okay, maybe a few. So I don't know, Heidi, if you're interested in more about it, there's a lot about it on the Census Bureau's website, and you can, Heidi, do you want to wave at everybody? This is Heidi. If you have questions about statistics in schools, talk to Heidi, because that's something the Census Bureau is wanting to do a lot more of, right? And we don't, on our agenda, we don't have a break scheduled, but in fact, our next session, I'm glad that Kaneen was talking a lot about the API, because we're gonna go deeper into the API, looking at some different ways to get at it. And, but that's not scheduled to start till 10:45. So if we need to take a break, this would be an excellent time to do it, and be back here in 12 or 14 minutes, and we'll hear from our next speakers.
And there is a cafe, I guess, right around the corner here, and a coffee cart in the building to the north of us out this way, FYI.
One of the things I would be interested in is an ability to collect things like counties. I work in
they don't want you to do it without the margins of error attached to it, exactly. But we know everybody goes ahead and runs it anyway, divides it by 7 or whatever. But this is kind of a more sophisticated way of doing it, but I believe it's in spreadsheet form, so it's kind of easy to stick them in. But if you give me your address, or if you even wanted to send an email to me, or even to the, to me, and then I can find that information and send it to you, that aggregator, whichever you want to do.
Let me give you my address now.
Sure.
It's Terrence A.
Terran. Okay, Terrence A.
at ctsi.nsm.us.
Okay. And then you are asking for the aggregation. Okay, I will get on that, for sure. No, yeah, that goes back to the whole Census Bureau. That's the thing that people ask the most about is time series for past year data, and then aggregation. I want to create my own community centers or, whatever from there. Okay, well, I'll send it to you for sure. And your name is Terrence, or is it? Okay, Terry, with an R-I-Y?
Why?
Okay. Well, it's good to meet you. Thank you. Let me know if you have anything else, and I'll send that to you. And then I could give you, I'll try to send you somebody that if you have questions, you can ask. Yeah, absolutely.
Share my screen, share my document, share my web. Share my screen. Why don't you just share the screen? Make sure all.
We didn't get the Skype until later last week or whatnot, and so we didn't have time to figure that out. So we're using this, and yeah, we can go through all of them. Okay. Oh my word, that's gonna be fun. we should, anywhere staying around here, you should be able to be picked up by that.
Okay.
But the streaming audio is coming out of the little mic on this guy.
Oh,
so
wow.
you
Okay.
shouldn't probably be over here talking.
Right. Okay.
If you're in this area, it sounds like it's picking you up from what
It's
I'm
gonna pick up?
getting.
Okay.
What I'm getting from people out in wherever they are, that
All right.
that's going okay. Other than that, if you get questions, try to repeat them if we don't get them a mic, because we are not the best Phil Donahues, as you can tell.
Yeah. No.
But we'll try to get mics. If not, just try to repeat.
I have to show you a letter that I'm writing up. I have to show you side attention. Because with like Jason giving the count. So I would assume that at some point Jason, Charles, and I sit down one side and so I'm drafting up this letter to like phrase my words very carefully so that it's not taken the wrong way. So I'd like you to take a look at it.
Okay. Yeah, I got your back. No, I got your back.
Like I don't want it to seem like we're trying to do is extort him or the college.
Oh, he knows that.
Yeah.
He knows that. Like,
But I
mean, it's all business
Yeah,
now.
but,
Like,
yeah,
it's just business.
but I do want it in writing, just be like, I don't want this to be like come off as like an extortion or like a threat. This is simply literally the only way that I see this being viable in the long term. So,
That's probably, I think that's probably a defensible way to go about it.
because I think silence, music and silence became extremely concerned with the aspect of Jason leaving the Yep, well, that's what happens when you don't invest in a center.
What the thing about it though too is like the forecast program isn't going to die. It's just will no longer be the limited in the state, right?
Yes,
Like, and it's gonna,
somebody else will take it.
the state for at least like 2 years. That's the other thing too, right? It's like it's not just like this is gonna be about the state. Like we will literally be in violation of the state constitution. Like
That's the thing.
like you're gonna have a whole bunch of cities like, why can't we expand the UGC? Why can't we do such a thing? Like, you know, you're gonna like Silverton up there. Like,
No, then if anybody asks me, I'm not going to hold back. I feel like lack of administrative and financial resources from the university for years and years of neglect has prompted me to leave. Like, it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
And people who are city officials and county officials, like, they probably understand that entirely. They're like, yeah, I get that. Yep.
I may call you up once or twice for some of your longer calls.
Oh, no, don't even worry about that. Just skip over it.
Okay.
It's fine. Just skip over it. Again, like, if we wanted to explain the actual call, then we would be doing a live demo. Like, no, it's fine. You can just skip over it. Are you talking about, like, the nest on nest thing?
Yeah.
But that's just for, just tell them, like, oh, this part of the code is just for, to visualize, for visualization purposes only. Like, that's really all it is. You're not doing any data transformations. So. So, I ended up with 164.
Bro, I got saved by, damn, who did I get saved by?
James Conner.
No, because I had Allen to start, and, you know, he shit the bed. It was, this random receiver, who was it?
Good one. Godwin.
Yes, Dodd, man. He went,
Oh no, he ran random receiver. He's now the number one wide receiver for Tampa Bay. He's implanted Mike Evans.
I mean, true, right? But you know, I mean, true. You know, he's also got like Jameis thrown to him. And, you know, like I love Jameis, but like,
No, like Godwin is like always good for at least 6 receptions and 8 yards.
yeah, I was like,
That's,
no, like, dude,
yeah. No,
and
he's like busting out this season.
yeah, dude, he went off for like 127, like 2 touchdowns.
He's
I was like,
woo. Yeah, he's basically his number one target now. Like Evans still gets his. His is more like the deep ball, but in terms of like a slot or if you need like a slow or something.
it was like, if you need 6 yards, he's
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. So that's who he throws to.
which is what, okay, and that's entirely the style now for the league. So I'm here for it.
Do you have some of your colleagues who are here? I haven't met any of them actually.
Yeah. That the group of folks up there.
Oh, the 3 guys over there?
Yeah.
Okay. Or 4?
Yeah, and black guy and the woman on the other side. The dude on the far left, I think, is the intern.
Yeah, he looks like he has nuts.
And he's so fresh. Fresh-faced.
And self-esteem.
You have to be broken down by the system.
By, it's broken down by the state of New York.
crushing reality. Wakes up every morning feeling good about himself. Yeah, he's able to look himself in the mirror in the morning. It's like, what a fucking arrogant piece of shit. He's so arrogant. He's like, oh, look at me, I can look at myself in the mirror. It's like I don't blankly stare at the wall for the first 15 minutes when I get up contemplating my life decisions. It's like, I don't have to have a mirror as soon as I wake up. Aren't you special? I think you're so goddamn cute because you don't have a low-key alcohol dependency. It's like, oh, what you don't see a therapist? Why don't you tell everyone about it? Jesus. I got two. One of them isn't even hourly. They're generally concerned about me. They don't even time it anymore. It's literally, it has to, they don't even time it anymore. It's like, he feels dead. They are writing a disease. Literally the subject of a book. All right. Good luck. What's the full time period? Is it 90 minutes or an hour? Okay, yeah, that's fine. Oh yeah, we got more than enough time.
Let's see. Hello, data users. We're calling all data users. We're gonna settle down and hopefully listen to one more session here before lunch. And we heard from Kaneen about getting into the data through data.census.gov. So we're gonna explore a different way of getting the data. And I've got Jamal Green right here, known him for several years because he was at PSU getting a PhD, and he got that PhD just a few months ago. And he's now he's currently is a research analyst with the Department of Human Services and here in Salem part of the time. So Jamal is going to show us analyzing census data in R.
Yes. Morning, everyone. So yeah, again, my name is Jamal Green. I'm a research analyst for the Department of Human Services with, what's the proper pronunciation name, guys? Is it, I always call it ORAI, and everyone says that's like, ORAI. The Office of Research Reporting and Implementation with the Department of Human Services. I work with a team of researchers as a spatial analyst, and also as an applied as an applied predictive modeler on questions of child welfare. My partner, who wrote most of the presentation, is Nick Chun. He is a demographer at Portland State. He's a demographer at Portland State University with the State Forecast Program. He labels himself an intermediate user of R. I think he's surpassed that level currently. I am a research analyst again for DHS, and again my specialties are in spatial analysis and predictive analytics. Again, like specifically around questions of child welfare and child abuse and neglect. The agenda for this presentation today, we're going to do kind of like a 5,000 foot grouping and introduction to R in the tidy census package. We're going to show some examples of pulling and analyzing the ACS data in R. We're going to be showing how to pull the loads data from the LEHD using a package that I co-wrote called Leader. And then we're also going to be showing a minor example using PUMS data in R, right? So trying to give a kind of like more holistic tour of many different kinds of census products that over the course of our careers or work we may run into. So I know that many of us I know that many of us, especially those of us who do a lot of reporting, we tend to see just like the same sense. We tend to work with the same tables basically all the time. For my team, we get a lot of kind of like new requests for many different kinds of research, and that requires us to touch like many different kinds of sets across census. So my work just this past week has required me to pull the ACS subject tables at the census tract level for the state, PUMS data for the state, and some LEHD data for Multnomah County, right? So, so my own work every single day is like very much reflective of the kind of workflow that you're going to be seeing here. So yeah, we just had a presentation that gave us a pretty decent look at the new data.census.gov and the SEDSide tools. And yeah, fact finder's gone, and we just have to accept that. It's gone. It's gone. It's fine. Or maybe not, but we shall carry on and persevere in the face of such adversity. And yeah, and one thing that I do think is valuable is that Census is doing its best to centralize everything to its API, right? And that means that if you have a way to actually access the API and use the API in a relatively straightforward fashion, we can be able to get most anything we need, right? This is where R comes in, and a smattering of the packages that I'm going to be talking about today, right? So the benefits of using R specifically for the analysis of census data is one, there's a lot of documentation now, including like blog posts from professors and researchers across the country, presentations like I gave at this very conference a couple of years ago. There's a lot of documentation now, such that if you are reasonably familiar with some kind of a scripting language, you can be able to pick this up. Relatively quickly. There's the option for trying to automate certain work. There's the option to automate certain workflows. This is again for my reporting folks. If you know that you're going to be running the same table every 6 months or 9 months, to be able to script that out can save you, just like a massive amount of time. The spatial analysis capabilities through the simple features package in R. I said this a few years ago here. It's only gotten better. It has absolutely changed the game in terms of GIS, in particular in terms of spatial work with census data, right? I always tell the story of, we would go to Fact Finder, you would search for your table that you knew exactly how to get, you knew exactly how to get, you know exactly how to get to that table. You go to the Tigerline site, you would download your tracks or your block groups, then you would bring it into ArcGIS and it would fail and you wouldn't know why it failed. Or you'd open up the table and you realize like, oh, I wanted poverty by race, by age, not poverty by sex. So you go back to Fact Finder, you download it, you go back to Tiger because you forgot that you downloaded the shapefile earlier, and you go and you bring it into Arc, it joins, and then you try and do one other thing and it crashes again with that 9999 error that we all know and love and hate, right? through Tidy Census now, you can download basically any amount of your ACS data, and you can ask it to be joined to the geography of choice. So it entirely cuts out that spot that's there. And then it also offers a full suite of geoprocessing tools to be able to do work. And those geoprocessing tools are backed, like by the C++ code that is like very, very fast, right? So we can actually get a good amount of performance improvement compared to our traditional kind of like browser to Excel to Arc triangle. Now it's just in one spot. There's also the option to recalculate the margins of error. As seasoned census data users, we know that the census, they give us the 90%. They give us the 90% confidence interval. I think purely to like frustrate us and trying to communicate to outside groups. We can now have that be a new and automatic recalculation for your margins of error to go to the 95th percentile, which, as good data users, we should care about the margin of error. I think especially in the state of Oregon, if you're breaking anything down by race, anything below like county level is going to be very, very suspect, like very suspect. So I would encourage everyone to at least look at their margins of error. And again, the documentation is like there and it's growing and it's becoming increasingly sophisticated and more accessible. And one that we did not include here, but is the most important feature in my opinion, is this is free, right? We are a poor state. We are not necessarily well-resourced agencies, to be able to say, hey, you don't have to carry these now like older SAS or STATA licenses per se, or you can like drop those number of licenses, that can be savings, of $100,000 a year, like quite, like not joking, right? That's a new analyst or pay hikes or like, notepads and pens, it's like, I mean, the savings are there and, I cannot overstate the value proposition of at least trying to move a good bit of your workflow into more open source things. In terms of the available products through the API, as was mentioned before, the API has got our decennial data, our subject matter tables, although we can't get block data available for 2000 yet. We have our ACS, the 1 and the 5 year tables, and we also have the Tiger census geographies, right? So again, we can neatly query our geographies and our subject matter tables all in one fell swoop. The way we do this in R, or at least I think the best way currently, assuming that you are trying to pull primarily the ACS and the decennial data, is through the Tidy Census package in R. The chief writer and maintainer of Tidy Census is Professor Kyle Walker at TCU. He's a geographer at TCU. The only thing you need is R, a decent connection to the internet, and a Census API key, which is free, and you can get within like I believe I've gotten my students to get a Census API key within 3 minutes of them requesting one, right? So you can basically do it like in real time. Okay, so say you want to be able to grab poverty by tract for the state of Oregon. Say you had a pretty big spatial database that already had your data that was fully attached to your database. A potential SQL query that you could have would be what you see here in terms of, hey, I want to be able to have my ID column. I want to be able to have the percent poverty and the income. and I want you to join that all to my tracked geographies, right? That call using the tidy census syntax is what you see here on the bottom, which is that I've got my poverty tract. I have my tract by poverty table. I'm pulling. I am pulling these two columns. I do a join on the tract. I pull only, again, the ID and the income variable. I say I want to join on the ID, and then I want to arrange or order by the income, right? For those of us who have used SQL, particularly the GIS users, right? Like, this is not a huge difference in the kind of language or scripting stuff that we have done before, right? So tidy census, again, at least in my experience, has been the least painful transition in terms of trying to move towards a more scripting-based workflow of our census data analysis, right? Yes? Okay, so this is the dplyr code, assuming that you've already pulled the tables. We have some syntax that is a couple slides down. That's going to be the actual call to be able to grab that first table, right? But assuming that you have the table, like, these two statements are basically the equivalent of what we're doing here, right? And for folks who don't know, dplyr is a package in R for working with working with data frames, and it's known for having, you know, a very opinionated yet straightforward syntax, and the use of the pipe there, that kind of the percent sign and the alligator mouth symbol to pipe our data through. Right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. For those of you who use R, this is, you know, probably not too unfamiliar to you. For those of you who do not use R, this is basically just setting up our working environment with a whole lot of options. But the basic part of it is that we are bringing in the packages that we want to use and to prepare ourselves for the analysis. Now, folks look at this and they throw their hands up and they're like, well, I can just like download the thing and go into Excel and not have to worry about all this. And it's like, yeah, but this is only like 20 lines of stuff, and you can literally just like copy and paste it forever if that's what you want. I'd be like, all right, it's not actually like that heavy a lift. It's just a new way of doing things. So again, like, I would encourage folks who are not as familiar with this to just try and give it a chance. Right? Okay, yeah. So that's just, you know, we continue to set up the working environment here. All right. So these are okay. Right. So these are actual calls to tidy census itself. The first call here, the load variables function, will pull all of our 5-year 2017 ACS tables for R, right? So you can actually go and you can open up the table and you can actually look at your table names. So you can be able to query them directly. For those of us who've been using American Fact Finder forever, this is very, very useful because we generally know like what table we want, but it's always like, do I want B103001_2 or underscore like 3, right? And it's like, okay, I can go to the table here and I can just search for that. I can just go and search for that directly, or you can actually pull just the like B103001 table series entirely, right? You can get the detailed tables, the data profile tables, the subject tables, and the decennial variable tables, right? So again, basically anything that you can pull from the API for ACS or the decennial, tidy census can handle well. Tidy Census does not currently handle the alternative products yet, such as the county business patterns and things like that. But I believe Professor Walker is working on trying to expand the functionality even more. But having a package that's limited to only quote unquote the ACS is still pretty good, especially for most work that I think most of us end up doing for the state. You can also pull the data profile tables and the S tables. The DP tables are, they are some of the most requested and downloaded tables because they handle a lot of the they handle a lot of the calculations and the summary stats that we would like to be able to have, which is, we very rarely want the raw counts of population, right? We are most often concerned about the percentages and the proportions, and our DP tables will give us that directly, right? So for one example here, we can take a look at the DP table for race for the total population for whites. And we can pull that directly into Tidy Census, and this is what it looks like, from FactFinder. Right. So let's say we want to try to be able to calculate the percent of the population in Portland of folks who are rent burdened at the tract level. Right. One way that we could start to set this up is that, I meant to comment out this section here. So this should still be brown and commented out. I apologize for that. The workhorse function of the Tidy Census package is the get ACS function. And as you can see, there are a lot of parameters in the get ACS function that one can be able to call. But again, right, like basically we can pull everything we need within a single call, including being able to grab our geographies. So we are saying, hey, I want to have the tract level. I want to be able to get these data profile tables. I'm going to name them these new things. I would like it for the 2017 5-year ACS for the state of Oregon. And I'm not going to specify county because I want all county, right? So this is how you can be able to grab all tracts for your state without having to name your own county, right? So I know a lot of us, evidently at Census, they don't know that a lot of us use tracts because it's not available to be able to pull all tracts easily right now. But for most of our work at least, our reporting is done or the requests are done at the tract level because that's about as detailed as folks can get, right? So that's how we can solve that particular issue. The geometry call here, that brings in our target line shape files, right? This is where the magic happens, right here. For the GIS folks, it's all right there, right? You say geometry true, brings in your shape file, joins it. That's it. Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's done. It's done. Exactly, right? Like it's amazing. I weep every time. The output option here will allow you to either have it as tidy or like long format, or wide for the wide format. Again, for the GIS folks, we traditionally work in very wide data because we need to be able to ideally map. We need to be able to map multiple variables at the same time. So if you do plan on going to export your table out for your desktop GIS, of course, your desktop GIS of choice, then you can set the output as equal to wide, and all your variables will come out as their own individual columns. Right, so this is an example of our wide versus long or tidy format, where the individual variables here are under a single variable column, right? And each of these variables are linked to their shape, right? The wide format is something that we are more used to seeing in the GIS community where each variable is its own column, right? So again, right, we can request wide or long at will. And if you happen to make a mistake on it, there are some packages. There are some packages for R that make it a lot easier to go from wide to long or long to wide, right? So again, you know, like R is a fully realized programming language, you know, so you can still be able to do like a lot of stuff just beyond just beyond the mere like pulling of the data itself, right? So as we go to calculate the renter cost burden rates, I'm not going to go through like line by line here per se, but you know, like I'm going to drop the total rent because we want to be able to calculate our proportions more easily. I'm going to group by the GUID. I'm going to group by our tract level. I'm going to then sum up. I'm going to sum up. I'm going to sum up our estimates here. I'm going to then make a new margin of error using the margin of error sum function, right? So as I sum and make a new unit, right, like the sampling error there changes. Tidy Census handles that for us, right? I'm going to make a new variable called CB that stands for cost burden. And then I'm going to basically like stick everything on top of each other and then arrange by the level of burdenness that we have now calculated, right? So from here, the final table result has our rent cost burden total number and the number of cost burden individuals as a secondary one. Again, all for the same tracks at a time, right? And for more easy calculations for our percentages and our proportions, again, using some external packages in R, we can change this from a long to a wide format. All right. So instead of changing from a long to a wide format, Nick has a cool trick here where he's basically saying, hey, I want you to take the first element of our estimate for the tract, and I want you to divide our estimate by that first element. That's a trick that I had not used before. It's kind of cool, and it saves a step of having to go wide if you don't necessarily like have to do that, right? Now, that's useful for our kind of like nested data structure here, where we are really dealing with where we are dealing with these population proportions, right? And then also too, there's a new margin of error proportion estimate function, and you can set the numerator and the denominator here, and then you get a new margin of error, right? So again, there's an entire like suite of supportive functions to not only make the handling of the data easier, but also to help us be like more careful and also more honest about the reliability of our estimates. And again, right, for anything that you're going to be cross-tabbing with race in the state of Oregon, like this is absolutely vital, absolutely necessary. Because trying to do anything with say for like the African-American population in Coos County, like your estimates are not going to be worth anything, right? And sometimes you need to be able to write in your report or your memo or email and say, hey, I ran these numbers because you asked for them. Also, they mean nothing, right? And even if, you know, your boss or an elected official decides to use them, you know, we do our due diligence in terms of covering our own rear end and say, hey, like, probably shouldn't use this way, but I will provide it to you because you asked for it. And then this set at the bottom here is basically to pull out the geometry column to basically save space and to just work on the table itself without worrying about the geometries per se, right? The real kind of like disruptive feature of the simple features package is that basically it treats your geometry like it treats it within a spatial database, which is your geometry is just another column, right? So you don't have to worry about like, how do I manage the like spatial nature of this? It's just another column, it's just text, right? So again, that means that you can treat your spatial objects like any other table object that you have, which again is just like a very powerful thing, and it makes our lives a whole lot easier and simpler. So you're not trying to do anything that's like remotely hard on a calculation level within, say, like ArcMap, which again, for those of us who have used Arc, you know, if you try and like calculate a new column, that's not just like turn something into text, you know, again, like crash or it holds up and your computer screens, and like it doesn't work generally. So after all that, we get our final cost burden rates by-tracked with our MOEs, right? So we've got our variables, we have the initial estimates that we pulled from Census, we have the MOE of those initial estimates, we have the calculated share of the population that is cost burdened at the tract level, and the margins of error, the estimate margins of errors for those proportions, right? And we've basically done that within like 20, 40 lines of code, right? Now again, if we're thinking about it from FactFinder to Excel to Arc, I mean, I can't even try to imagine to like recalculate margin of error in Arc, right? I mean, it's just like, that is like the stuff of nightmares, right? I mean, it's hard enough to do within Excel because the formula is, you know, is like pretty big and complex, and you know, it's not like the easiest thing. Here we have it all done for you and wrapped up nice and pretty, and because the documentation is there, you can actually go and look at the function itself, right? And you can go and you can go and double check it yourself. Another very powerful feature is the ability to, again, fairly easily, and I think in a relatively straightforward manner, join and export our data, again, I think in a much more powerful way. So again, for those of us who've used Arc, table joins are not terrible, but they're also not great. For my dissertation work, I made the mistake one time of trying to do a big table join of every census tract in the country in Arc. Yeah, on like my campus server, and even the like server was like, I don't know what you're doing. Like, that's not what we're designed for, right? So again, R is a statistical programming language. It's designed to have us chop tables, join tables, and do whatever you want, right? So all of the speed and the benefits that you get from using R are translated here for our work using our census data. So again, right, it's not saying that, you know, using the other tools is incorrect, but it's saying that, hey, like, we can get better performance and a simpler workflow than what we had before, and for free, right? So again, right, like the basic syntax here is saying, okay, cool, I want you to pull only the cost burden rows. I want you to keep our GeoID, our cost burden share, and the cost burden share margin of error. And then I want you to join it to the spatial file for the city of Portland, and only keep the name Portland there. And then we can export this out actually as a shapefile, right? And for the ST export here, you can export out as a shapefile, as a GeoJSON, as a KML file, as a geo package, or whatever your preferred form of a spatial file is, right? So we are no longer limited to only the shapefile, right? And the weaknesses of the shapefile, such as, you know, say you want to be able to have your column CB share a margin of error to maintain in your shapefile. How many characters is that? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, yeah, so that like barely makes the shapefile rule of like your 12 character limit on a column name, right? Now again, if you export this to something that's not a shapefile that does not limit your column character limit, you can actually have, like actually descriptive column names for a shapefile, which is, again, kind of like a radical thing to think about, as I think many of us in the past have had, like the most inscrutable of column names after you get like 20 columns in, and you're like, oh, this is tract share spelled like SHR, like tilde, like it's just wild stuff. You're just like, I don't know what these columns are supposed to be doing. Jesus, sorry. Right, and then using the TMAP package, which stands for the thematic map package, that can play natively well with that now plays well with simple features object in R. You can actually make a pretty passable map, right? This is like pretty close to a presentation quality map. You might want to change the legend title a bit. Maybe we drop the neat line, but but for a lot of our work, this map is perfectly fine and serviceable. And again, right, this is all a part of a singular workflow. We haven't left R at all here, right? And we didn't even need to export to shapefile. We just did that just to say like a check in terms of what's going on, right? So we did not have to export and then like re-import the file in order to be able to map this. It can just use the existing simple feature object which exists in your memory within your R session at the time, right? So again, right, the entire like kind of like workflow of the entire like geographer workflow of gathering our data, processing the data, mapping the data, we can do all in one area now. So again, the straightforward nature of this, I'm not going to say simplicity because, like clearly there's like harder stuff here if you are not as familiar with it, but it's much easier, I think in my opinion, to only have to focus on one environment than to try to remember the weirdness of Excel and ARC and whatever like your third programming tool that you're using is, right? Also too, I think an underrated portion of this is that, R will read in your columns based upon the format that the API gives it to them, right? So, we don't have to worry about this in the state of Oregon, but if you're doing anything where you have to do any kind of like national mapping and you have to bring in like, say like in Alabama or in Alaska, and that leading zero drops off if you like uncritically like go and open it up in Excel, does not happen here, right? So again, these things are more type safe and they're more consistent over time. Yes. Okay. A quick recap here. This was our basic call, right, for our get ACS variable. We collapsed our rent burden groups. We calculated new shares and new margins of errors for those shares. Then we did a spatial join and an export. Oh, yeah, and that was it, right? So again, right, and that's, again, like maybe 40 to 50 lines of code for, a relatively complex workflow. But again, right, like we don't have to go from American Fact Finder to Tigerline to ARC to Excel to SPSS and back, right? Now it's just in one fell swoop in one whole place, right? So who here has used loads data from the LEHD? I heard a person earlier who asked about the LEHD data. Yeah. There's a package now to grab the loads data for you. It is maintained by myself and Professors Leming Wong and Leming Wong of Portland State University and Dylan Mahmoudi of University of Maryland of Baltimore County. You can be able to query our work, resident, and work resident and origin destination files. These are synthetic data that are derived from different from different admin data records in the ACS. And the available geographies through the package are basically everything from block up to state within that kind of like block county nested block county nested hierarchy. And you can combine it with, and because it's an R package, you can combine it with a bunch of different other kinds of packages, right? The comparison, as Nick says, is you have the LEHD and ARC. It's very frustrating. The LEHDR and simple features, I think, is a superior way of going about it, right? It is not yet up on CRAN. I plan to try to submit to CRAN, which is kind of like the master repository of certified R packages. So you do have to download it from GitHub using the DevTools package. And again, right, so again, right, like the granddaddy function for this is called grab loads. And again, like I based a lot of this on Tidy Census as kind of an inspiration for how to try and navigate and set up these packages, right? So I consider this as like a cousin or even a child of the Tidy Census package, right? You can ask for the state, your year, your the data type in terms of your loads type, again, our job types, our segments. You can also ask it to aggregate the geographies, again, anything within that block to state hierarchy. And we can also ask for the state part as either main or auxiliary if you want to include out-of-state workers. Oh yeah, these are pulling the origin destination files for in-state and out-of-state workers. This function here joins those things together. And then it also joins those tracks to the spatial tract data that we had pulled in before, right? So now you can go directly from the LEHD tables to your Tiger Line geographies. Again, not as seamless as Tidy Census, but if you have Tidy Census or the Tigris package, again, you just have to call for the tracks. And then the join is literally just join based upon your columns here. Right, so this is what the ultimate simple features object will look like. So we have our year column here, state, our worker tract, our home tract of the workers, and the estimates of the employment for our varied categories within the LEHD. And there is our geometry column that is, again, just defining the tract geometries, right? So you could actually map this right now within R, or you could export it out as a spatial object. So that's a very quick introduction there. If you're very curious, we can talk about it later. Now, really, a major new thing here, and there's not necessarily really great package support yet, but it's growing out, is really trying to use the public use PUMS files. Who here has had to use the PUMS files before or have heard of them? Yeah, right. I mean, these are the underlying files that make up the ACS tables. It's about as disaggregated as you can be able to get. It contains person level and housing level characteristics, and the data is aggregated to the public use microdata area that are geographies that hold approximately 100,000 people. In order to be able to download the PUMS data, you can go directly to the Census site for this, or you can also use the IPUMS website through the University of Minnesota. That has also done a lot of work to try and normalize and connect the public use the public use microdata series going back now, I think, to 1790. And again, right, we can get all of the detailed documentation from Census or from the IPHM site. The Census site does offer these estimates for user verification, where it basically gives you like some sample of population estimates for your state along with their margins of error, so you can be able to double check your estimates. This is very, very handy because we will be doing some like kind of like trickier stuff and trying to be able to handle the complex survey design nature of the PUMs, which can, you know, like drastically change not only your estimates but also your standard errors if something is misspecified. So so being able to have that check is incredibly useful. This is using the SurveyR package. The SurveyR package is a wrapper for the survey package. The survey package is designed to handle complex survey objects. The SurveyR package basically takes the survey package and it allows you to use like the dplyr syntax for the survey package, right? So for those of you who might be used to using dplyr now as part of your everyday work, this makes a relatively painful process significantly less painful because you don't have to worry about, okay, how do I handle my kind of like data, how do I handle my data manipulation charges using this different package. With the SurveyR package, you don't really have to do that much. That is different. We will read in the housing and the person level data. This is just to lower the variable names to lowercase here. The fread function here is from the data.table package. It's a very, very fast CSV reading package. For those of you who might be working with CSVs in excess of 1 million rows, which, you know, a lot of us who use the admin data, that starts to blow up on you. Data.table is very, very fast and very, very efficient. I would heavily recommend it. The basic structure of the PUMS household table is that we have our serial number, that is the actual household ID, the PUMA where the household resides, the number of people within the house, our tenure and our household income variables, and then these replicate weights. The replicate weights are there to calculate proper standard errors. And we don't really go through it here, but there's an entire way of like setting up the survey design object using that SurveyR package to make sure that your standard errors are being properly estimated. That unfortunately is not a very straightforward thing. I just copy the same script that I've had from this guy who maintains a website on doing open source complex survey data analysis, and he's basically like reworked all of the census rules to say like this is how you go and you set it up. I think the kind of like next frontier is going to try and figure out how do we make this to be like less of an onerous thing on working with the replicate weights and getting proper standard errors. I've written to the IPHMS people who now have an IPHMS R package that doesn't actually do anything with the complex survey design object, and I recommended like, hey, maybe it would be cool if you guys like made it easier to calculate standard errors in the package that holds your name. And they were like, oh, no one said that to us before. So I was like, okay, fine. So maybe in like 3 years, we will have something useful there. But there is information out there on how to properly set the objects, especially for the ACS data. This is the person level structure again. So now we have the household ID, the person order. So this is for the head householder and other people within the household number, the PUMA, the age of the individual, the self-identified sex, race Hispanic, and the replicate weights for the person level as opposed to the housing level. Right. And then say we want to join our household level and our person level data together. We will pull out just the head of householder. So we only have one person per household, and then we can join back to our housing level data to try and bring in right? Those individual level attributes to the housing, to the housing level itself, right? Here is where it gets complicated, right? So again, this is a complex survey design object. Census does a lot of shenanigans and waiting to make sure that the estimates are accurate. So that means that we can't just like add, subtract, and multiply as we please and hope that we get proper standard errors. We have to be able to set a survey object. Using the survey art package, the function to do that is called as survey rep. So for survey objects with replicate weights, we set our basic weight variable here. We say, okay, cool. The replicate weights are all the columns that start with WGTP. The scaling here is related to how Census calculates their standard area formula. I don't remember the exact reason why it's 4/80. It's in the Census documentation. R scales is also related to doing the final doing the final calculation there. Again, all of this is like taken directly from that resource that I had mentioned earlier. The replicate weights are included in the sample, so we say the combined weights are equal to true, and Census uses this jackknife method for calculating the final error, right? So all this is set here in the survey replicate weight design, but if you aren't like intimately familiar with how Census handles its standard error, on how Census handles its standard error calculations and weights, there's no reason whatsoever why you would know what this means. And I still have to look it up every single time. It's very complicated. This is just something that, like I accept from on high, and then I check against the user estimate that are provided by the Census, and it checks out, so I just assume that it works. Right? So, that's about as far as I can do on my for my level of due diligence there, right? So then now we can be able to take our new survey design object, and now we can use our dplyr syntax on our survey design object to now go in to calculate like median household income by race and ethnicity and educational attainment for the head of household or for the state of Oregon. So we're going to say, hey, for those folks who are not listed as having a listed educational attainment, let's drop those. Let's group by our ethnicity and educational attainment, and then let's use this like survey median function here to calculate our median household income with our proper standard errors. And then we just go and ungroup so we can look at everything at the end. And then we can also pull out even more. Say we only want high school and baccalaureate graduates. We can use our filter command to pull out the rows that only have the high school and bachelor for our educational attainment column. Nest and unnest I'm not going to get into. That's basically to like make this table look nice at the end here. But now we've got our race and we now have our race and ethnicity. We have our bachelor's median household income. We have our bachelor's median household income standard error, and the same for our high school, right? You can't get this in your summary tables, right? And this is where the PUMS becomes like very important, right? But also because it's like, like with, like with great power, right? Like it's not the easiest thing to get into, and it's very, very easy to make a mistake, and people cut a lot of corners. And understandably so, right? Like this is like a pain to do. But again, right, like if we're trying to give credible estimates for certain stuff, and again, especially on race, ethnicity, right? I mean, the differences in the standard errors here, like across these racial groups is huge, is absolutely huge, right? Where like, this is almost a fifth of our estimate here, right, is off. And it's more than half here, right? So, you know, these estimates, at least for other race listed high school graduates, we can't say anything about that median household income, like at all, right? So, you know, and that's like super important. And at least for us as researchers, that should give us an opportunity, you know, assuming that there's resources to give us, say, hey, maybe we should run our own survey, or maybe we should think about some alternative ways of gathering additional data because there is a gap here, right? Census can't give us everything, right? And if our lawmakers actually want these like programs to work, right? Part of this has to be on the data collection end, right? I mean, like, we can't machine learning our way out of this, right? The estimates are just off because the sample is too small, right? It's just a fact, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's all we've got for today. If you need to holler at Nick Chun, he has offered his email and his phone number. I don't know why I gave the phone number. Please call him all the time and like save him from like the sheriff of Coos County who's mad at his population forecast. If you have general questions about the work of the population, if you have general questions about the work of the Population Research Center at Portland State, or if you're interested in learning more about some things, there's the Ask PRC, and at the bottom is my email for DHS and OHA. Thank you.
Wanted to add one thing about that Jamal mentioned about the user verification. You know, he said when he gets the results, he checks it against the user verification published data. Well, be aware that the results that you'll get from a PUMS tabulation, even if they're perfect, won't be the same as what you get from FactFinder or data.census.gov, because it's actually a different sample. It's only about 2/3 of the cases that are in the PUMS. So the user verification that he was talking about, you can, if you find the PUMS technical documentation on the Census Bureau's website, go to ACS or go to PUMS documentation. There's a link, PUMS documentation, and it'll give you the answer that you should get for the state, for any state like Oregon. It's not going to give you every city and county, but at the state level, if you run your PUMS tabulation in R or any program, and you want to find out, you know, run it first for the state, and then check that result against there's an Excel spreadsheet that you can click and open up the basic characteristics for the state. You know, if you hit that number, then you know you're doing it right. And by the way, I've been emailing the person back at our office who puts stuff on the web. She had that nasty cold that everybody's had, including me 2 weeks ago, and Nick right now, Nick Belichick's. She wasn't in yesterday to be able to post these presentations, but she is posting them today. So I was thinking about that, especially as we were seeing Jamal's presentation, because it's going to be out there in a PDF, and it is, I checked it, it is selectable. So I know that you'll if you want to use R, you won't want to type all that stuff. You'll want to select the text and paste it in there. Save yourself lots of work. So we've got full agenda this afternoon from 1 to 4. We're going to hear about what Oregon is doing to plan for the 2020 census. And then we're going to find out what kind of data we're going to get in 2021 when that 2020 census is released. So please come back at 1 p.m. and we'll resume. Thanks, everybody.